So I see Christians claim stuff like this all the time, but where's the evidence? This is a contradictory statement. You see, Jesus said in John 14:15, if you love him, keep his commandments. Now, many people have claimed in my comment section, well, that's before he died. Well, let's look at texts about after he died. Romans was written several decades after the cross, and Romans 3 says, for by the law is the knowledge of sin. And in 1 John 3 verse 4, the Bible says, for sin is the transgression of the law. Both of these are letters that were written several decades after the cross. Paul goes on to say, do we then make void the law through faith? No, God forbid, he says. Yea, we establish the law. But many Christians will read this text to say, do we then make void the law through faith? God forbid, we void the law. But of course, this verse says we establish the law, not void it. Paul says in Romans 6, shall we sin that grace may abound? God forbid. How can there be sin if there is no law? Especially when the Bible says, for by the law is the knowledge of sin. Many Christians use this verse to say that we're not under the law, when what Paul is really saying is we're not under the condemnation of the law as long as we're under grace. If you claim the law was abolished so you can continue in your sin, you are under the condemnation of the law. And here Paul says yet again, shall we sin because we're not under the condemnation of the law but under grace? God forbid. Paul here says, for the wages of sin is death. And again, sin is the transgression of the law. If there is no law, there is no sin. Now here Jude says, keep yourself in the love of God. Here the Bible defines the love of God as keeping his commandments. Now many people will say Jesus gave us new commandments. No, he didn't. And they'll point to this text to try and prove that he gave us new commandments. He said, love God, love your neighbor. But when he was saying love your neighbor, he was quoting from the 10 Commandments. And when he said love God with all your heart, he was quoting from the 10 Commandments. So to love God with all your heart and to love your neighbor as yourself is to keep the 10 Commandments. Now, every adjective that describes God in the Bible also describes his law. Here's the scriptures. Pause to read, screenshot, whatever you need. Now here in Revelation 14 verses 6 and 7, the Bible says, fear God, and lists that as being part of the gospel. It also quotes from the Sabbath commandment and lists it as being part of the gospel. Ironically enough, when you press Christians enough, they will admit it's not the other 9 they want abolished, it's the Sabbath. Now when you search the term fear God and fear commandments, what it means to fear God is to keep his commandments. And that's part of the gospel, according to the Bible itself. The Bible says this in the very last chapter of the Bible. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life, and enter in through the gates into the city. If you love God, keep. If you want to be his friend, keep his commandments. Those who claim to know him and disobey are liars, according to the Bible.